This is Bill Gross. I am the LAProbateExpert.com, and this is our Tuesday afternoon at 3 p.m. Pacific Time, Real Estate Investing Zoom.com, where we get together and share ideas and practices and systems to help first-time investors get some property, experienced investors find some deals and some new people to work with, and vendors to help them get some business as well. We're all here to get some business. If you're here to get some business, say yes, put it in the chat box. Or if you're watching this also on Facebook or YouTube Live, the chat also works there. Feel free to put it in there in the chat box. But the more you participate, the more money you make. So if you're here to make some money, put yes in the chat box. Who's here to make some more money besides me? Anybody? No, it's all mine? I'll keep all the extra? Okay, there you go. There's some. Great. Okay, good. So you want to participate. I think this is one of the principles of business is the more you put into anything, the more you get out of it. In business, that's certainly true. You can have anything you want in life if you help enough other people get what they want. So I wanted to start today with a couple of things. We've been going each week, just one of the systems of real estate. And I would say there's about 21 different systems of real estate that you have to master. In the past, we talked about goal setting, a business plan, time management, prospecting, lead follow-up, pre-qualifying, a presentation skill. And today, I want to talk a little bit about pricing property. It's really critical that you know the value of property. Very often I get new investors who will say, oh, I have a great deal, it's under contract, and they'll show it to me. And they haven't run the numbers. And when you run the numbers, there's not enough money to make a profit on it. Or there's just enough to cover all the costs, but no profit on the deal, pretty commonly. And so I ask, well, have you run the numbers? So when you present a property to people, you want to show them two things. One, what's it going to cost them to get into the deal? And second, you want to find out what they're going to get out of the deal. Are they going to get monthly cash flow? Or are they going to be able to flip it for a profit? And to do that, you have to have a sense of the value of the property as it sits and a sense of the value upon completion. So pricing property is really critical. That's why I recommend to new investors, pick a narrow area and try to see everything in that narrow area. And by doing that, you'll really learn the value of property pretty quickly. And that way, when you see something right away, you know it's a good deal or you know it's not a good deal based on the numbers. Now, those numbers are changing. Right now, the market's jumped up 10% or more just in the past year. So what would not have been a good deal a year ago could be a good deal today. And if you're watching the numbers, then you keep up with that. If you're a real estate agent, you should be pulling every single month things like active properties, closed sales in your area, and then look at the numbers. The median price, has it gone up or down over last year, or how much has gone up? So pricing property is critical. Looking at property is the only way to do that, and looking at the value of properties on a regular basis is a really important skill that you need to spend time on every single week in order to get good at that. I also want to share something today. I'm going on Thursday to Florida, to Aventura near Miami, to be with Grant Cardone. He has a business conference starting Friday through next week on Wednesday, so I'll be there. We'll be streaming this live next Tuesday. We'll be streaming it live as well Thursday, our Probate Weekly. But I'm really excited to go there for a couple reasons. One, obviously, he's a very motivational person, very motivational speaker. I would say one of my current coaches. Second, I would say because I learned a lot about real estate from him. And third, I think there'll be a lot of deals that I'll look at. There'll be a lot of people there with business. And how do you find business? You get people, you get deals, you sit in the middle, and you get paid somehow. So he's been doing a free training for those of us who are going to that, or as a way to get people to go to that for the last week. And today he talked about his, what he called unbreakable rules of investing. And there's 8 unbreakable rules. I want to just cover real quick and see what you guys thought of these and see if anybody has any differences of them or any experience with any of them. So number 1 is never compromise on location. He says that what you're buying really is a particular location. You're buying a certain building or a certain property in a certain area in a certain street. And don't take the second or third choice. Look for the best value based on the location. That's what real estate is, what you're paying for at the end of the day. Never compromise location. This comes up for people who are using 1031 exchanges where you'll have to nominate 3 properties. By definition, a first choice, second choice, and a third choice. Unless they're all the same, many people use a 1031 and compromise and choose the third best property because 1 and 2 don't close and you can't pay enough on them. And as a result of that, they end up with an inferior investment. They save money on taxes, but end up with an inferior investment. So he says never compromise on location. You want the best location that you can afford. Second, he said the 1% rule. Very rarely now can you achieve it, but anytime you can, jump on it. The 1% rule says anytime you can buy property where the monthly rent is 1% of the purchase price. So if a property is renting for $1,000 and sells for $100, buy it right away. If it rents for $2,000 and sells for if it rents for $2,000 a month and can be purchased for $200,000, buy it right away. If it rents for $3,000 a month and it's $300,000, buy it right away. There's not many of those, particularly single-family homes. There's more of those in multifamily. That's why you see more and more professionals moving into the multifamily space. So the 1% rule. Number 3, units allow you to scale. So if you're a new investor, maybe you can't buy units, but you can buy a piece of units or find a deal for an investor and take your commission or your finder's fee as a piece of it and use that to scale up. But units are the easiest way to scale up your investments. I'll tell you personally, I've not been doing unit investments, but I'm planning to. I just have a big deal closing here in the next month or so. I'm going to take that money and buy some multifamily so I can scale up. Number 4, he says always use debt. And he's referring to a little feud he has with Dave Ramsey. And it's funny, Dave Ramsey and he have different philosophies, which you can respect, but have really become almost enemies in the sense that Grant Cardone's wife has joined DXP, and Dave Ramsey's banned DXP agents from his program, which is kind of stupid. But Dave Ramsey will say the goal is to pay off your house. And that might be for people who are comfortable and just want to get to a certain level. But if your goal is to drive up your net worth and try to provide as much as you can for your family, for your community, then your house equity becomes a powerful tool that you can use to generate more income and more wealth. So Grant's at the other end of that disagreement, saying that you should use your home equity to buy a property. Number 5, he says, always look for barriers to entry. There's something that somebody else can't buy. If you're the only one or the last one of something that's desirable. He showed how he bought a property on the Gold Coast of Miami, and he has the last surf shack that's on the beach. They don't allow them anymore, and he had one. He bought a house that had one, and he restored it. And so he goes, I don't know what it's worth, but nobody else has a surf shack on the beach but me. And so that becomes, for somebody who's wealthy, obviously, they're going to pay a premium for something like that. But think of any other property, any barrier to entry, any property that is special, that gives something that other houses don't have, grandfather clauses on development or things like that will be very valuable. Number 6 is buy below replacement cost. I think this is why right now you have such a surge in activity. While it's true that every house now is selling for more than the last house did, what's also true is that it costs more to build that house than it costs to buy it. And so since the population naturally is going up because of immigration and naturally people being born, that if there's going to be more people with the same number of houses, if you can buy a house cheaper than you can build one, it makes sense to buy property cheaper than replacement, particularly, again, multifamily and units. He says, number 7, underwrite to the worst case scenario, meaning when you look at a deal, assume things go bad. Assume a decrease in rents 5, 10% or more. So you want to assume that and see if you can withstand that or work your way through that situation. And number 8, he says, if it doesn't cash flow, don't buy it. So he's all about the cash flow. And obviously, a deal can not make sense, but if by buying it you have positive cash flow, how can it not make sense, right? You can argue about the comparables all you want, but if you're getting more money every month as a result of the deal, and in particular, if you can improve the property, refinance, get your cash back, that's where the deal really cash flows. So again, those are his 8 rules of investing that he talked about today. It was a 5-hour long presentation, and he threw that in, so I wanted to share that with you guys. Let's see, let me go over, I kind of missed all this in the chat box, sorry. Helping others, thank you. Greg Rocks, fine. Dominic, I have an apartment complex under contract, 6 units fully occupied in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Right off the beach, my wife used to live in Myrtle Beach. 4-bedroom, 1 bath, and 2-2-3, 1 bath. Cap rate 6.7, undervalued. Current rent with increased cap, looking for $103,000. So, Dominic, are you looking for an investor or are you looking for a loan?
I'm looking for an investor.
Do you have, so would you like people to contact you? Do you have a flyer on the property? How can I help you promote that? There's a nice good deal.
So I have the apartment under contract. I can give my phone number. I prefer people to contact me personally. I put some pictures on there. everything would be through banks. We would put it through all right now we're during the due diligence process. So everything would be through the bank.
Okay. And what's the total purchase price?
520.
520. And so you're looking for somebody to put 130. Would that be the entire down payment or part of the down payment, or what are you looking for?
That would be the down payment. Yes.
Okay. You know, for some reason I have problems getting these pictures into the system. See, there's, I don't think I'm going to be able to get these in that way.
Yeah.
So,
no work needs to be done. It's fully occupied. So everything is on the up and up.
Nice. Okay, so $130,000 is down payment for property in Myrtle Beach, selling for 520. So that sounds like about 25% down payment. And is there money needed for rehab, or is the property going to just take over as is?
No, money is the property is turnkey. There's no rehab. There's no nothing. So with the investment, what would happen is I would talk offline with whoever contacted me after I put my number. The person would receive interest payments per month and a balloon payment at the end. And then we would just discuss what percentage of the interest they would be receiving on a monthly basis and what they would receive at the end.
Got it. Okay. So Dominic, can you put your contact info in the chat box?
I will do that.
Good. So there's a deal right there for anybody who's interested in units. Well, I like that deal. I'm not sure I'm going to do it today. Personally, I focus on selling houses right now between now and November. I have a pretty ambitious goal to achieve. Our company status is called Icon, and I have 10 more deals to close between now and the end of November. So once that's done, I'll be in the hunt for some passive income. But I don't know if I can sneak one in now. There you go, Dominic. Thank you for your contact info. Anybody who wants to reach out to him, see in the chat box. I'll put that into our YouTube chat as well. And then, and if not, of course, feel free to reach out to me personally. Dominic, thanks for bringing that deal to the table today.
No worries. Thank you for having me here.
Marcy Green, can I post or send a printout of the Unbreakable rules? Yes, I can. And let's see. Actually, you know what? There's actually 12. I'll give you 8, 9. And then Unbreakable rules from Grant Cardone. I left off 4. 9. Price is the least important metric. I'm going to put it in the chat box right now so I don't forget. Price is the least important metric. Why is that? Because if it cash flows, if you put money in and get money out at a reasonable rate, it doesn't matter what you pay for it. And what he was explaining on, I don't know about Dominic's deal, but some deals you can buy a property and it cash flows, you rehab it and raise the rents and then refinance and pull all your money back out. Mm-hmm. And so that's where the price doesn't matter. It really matters what your exit strategy is. So people get very caught up on the price and comparables, and in today's market, that's where people fall apart a bit. 10, he says, know your exit strategy. You have to have a way out of the deal. If you have a way out, you're in good shape. If you don't have a way out, you can get trapped, and that's where people get into trouble. He said refinance is one option, but never sell the property. You can put your cash out, put it in your pocket, and hold it forever if it's positive cash flow. He would say never sell. Now, he makes an exception. If you have to sell in order to buy something else, then do that. But he's really big on holding property forever. And then the other part, number 12, and this is counterintuitive. He says you always want competition. It means you have a good deal. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't find things off market, you only bidder on it. But he's saying when there is a deal in the market, and most investors, most deals are on the market. Everybody loves off-market deals, but every investor I talk to, most of their deals come through LoopNet or through the MLS. And therefore, if it is, you want competition. If you can slide by without it, great. But it means you have a really good deal. It's confirmation. The market's telling you you have a good deal. And so what you then want to do is compete on the quality of your offer, on the delivery of it, the salesmanship of it, your reputation. Connect with somebody who can help strengthen your reputation if necessary. So he was saying competition is a good thing. So I put that in the chat box, and I'll put those in the notes as well when we're done. So thank you for asking there and reminding me. Professor Cashflow, Gary Peros says, terms are more important than price. Absolutely. In fact, you have a whole business on that subject. We talked last week a little bit about taking notes instead of cash, or offering notes instead of cash, and giving sellers what they want, helping to avoid taxes, right? Your whole business is premised on that. So that's a yes, he's nodding, but that's where we go. Okay, good. So competitive deal, I bet he would yield on price and ask for favorable terms, ensure cash flow. I don't know about that. I think he would offer a higher price if he can get good terms and offer a bigger price in order to get his offer accepted. Some of the deals he walked through on today, and if you have a chance, you get invited to it. He has a Facebook thing every morning for about an hour, and he walks through different deals that he's done. It's staggering. He bought property in Boca Raton. I knew this property. I used to live in Boca. I remember this property was built, Meisner Court. And he walked through the numbers, and he bought it and rehabbed it, raised the rents, and pulled the cash out refi. Amazing deal. And for people who doubt him, he's laid out all his transactions. I mean, it's really amazing what he's done. So, okay, good. So, hey, Patricia Castillo, how are you? In between a couple deals there. Nice to see you.
Well, I'm doing great. Thank you.
No, you're doing great. You are in fuego.
Fuego caliente, muy caliente.
Hace calor, sí. And she is in fuego. She's listings and escrows and writing offers and appointments with new leads. So what nice to see you on the call. Great. Okay, so that's what I want to talk about today. Grant Cardone's 12, not 8. Sorry about that. I didn't scroll down. I saw the whole talk today. It was amazing, mouth-dropping. But the 12 Unbreakable rules he talks about in real estate investing. Any questions on what those mean or how they would apply to you? No?
Can you reiterate the always use debt, please?
Yeah, I think that this is part of a debate, ongoing debate between the philosophy of Dave Ramsey. If you know who Dave Ramsey is, he really is a phenomenal talent. He's a radio personality, one of the largest in the country. And I think I would say he teaches better fundamentals of personal finance than anybody.
I used to listen to him every day on the radio. He's got some great advice.
He has some great advice. He has a definite point of view. He is very Christian, which some people like and some people are turned off by. I call that the flavor, but not the message. The message are the principles of finance. My wife is a high school teacher and teaches finance as an elective to girls in high school. And she basically uses Dave's video program as content in her class to teach the fundamentals of budgeting and balancing your checkbook and saving money and avoiding debt. Because people grew up thinking if you have credit cards and if you just make the minimum payments, you're good and you're building your credit score. And he talks about how the credit score is really a con game. In fact, it's funny, both Grant Cardone and Dave Ramsey both think that credit scores are a con game created by the banks to trap people in debt. So both of them believe that consumer debt's bad, student debt's bad, car loan debt's bad. They both agree with that. Dave Ramsey says, to answer your question, Dominic, Dave Ramsey says that your home loan is bad. Your goal and his steps, one of the goals is to pay off your home loan. Grant Cardone would say not to pay off your home loan, but to use the equity you've built in your home. In fact, live modestly until you achieve your financial goals. If you have equity in your home, use that to invest in. So either sell the house, that's what he did. He sold his house and bought a portfolio of properties that ended up being worth $25, I think, or $30 million profit to him because the house he sold, I want to say it was in Newport Beach or Laguna Beach. He sold the property and then he bought a property up in Hollywood Hills and he sold that into a portfolio of multifamily properties. I think he made $25 million on. And he says that was the deal that changed his whole finances. And so he would say not to use your equity of your house to buy other property and build wealth. Dave Ramsey would say pay off your house and every month save money towards your personal wealth. I don't know that either one's wrong. I would say I think that Grant Cardone sets standards and goals much higher and faster. And Dave Ramsey is certainly much more about a more consistent, maybe more sure path to success.
Those two are totally different people.
Well, they're different personalities for sure.
Yeah, their image and everything. I mean, Dave Ramsey, I don't think you'd see Dave flying around in a helicopter with his name on it.
Well, and yet you see Grant Cardone flying people in helicopters to buy properties he's selling. And so there's a difference there. And I'm not saying one's right or wrong. I think it's important to be able to understand other people's perspectives and not get caught up on our own. And I think to some degree, it's easy when look, it's very hard for Dave Ramsey or Grant Cardone to ever evaluate other people's perspectives. That's why when you meet a great interviewer, like a Joe Rogan, for example, I don't really know much about him personally, but I can tell you is he interviews people from a huge perspective because he's open-minded enough to ask questions and try to learn what's this person thinking, not coloring it with his flavor. And so Dave Ramsey, who I have great respect for, clearly has a particular color of finances that he would discount. But I also know people who've made fabulous wealth, and have changed the world and created the world that Dave Ramsey is allowed to live in because they have big dreams, big goals, and pursue them. And so it depends on your life and the life you want to live. And I think you have to learn how to be not judgmental about other people's choices. I think both of them can be a little positioned and a little judgmental for my taste. So, but that's just me. Am I friends with Joel Rogan? I met Joe Rogan, the interviewer, and I've never met him, but I watch his podcast just because he interviews such a wide variety of people. And Rosalind, yes, Rosalind, Dave Ramsey is great for teenagers. Really phenomenal material. I think my daughter, who's newly married, her husband, they are part of the Dave Ramsey program, and they have the app, and they save money, and they go to Costco together. And I think two things I would say. One, it's great to see young people involved in that. And two, particularly in marriage, when two people are on the same page financially, it eliminates a major source of stress. Now, it helps they both have good jobs. But I would say having them on the same path is really a very powerful place as a parent. It's really where you will see your kids be. So very exciting. Okay, so we talked about the rules of finance. We talked a little bit about the importance of we started pricing property. We talked about Dominic's deal in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, which sounds like a really interesting. I'm going to take a look at that myself, I think. I don't know that I'm quite of a mind to buy a property today just because I have a lot on my plate, but definitely something worth looking into. Anybody have any questions that we can help with?
Bill, this is Anders, can you repeat, never compromise location ever?
Yeah, so what he's saying there, what he's saying is that when you think about real estate, when you buy a house, as a real estate agent, you're really not buying a box of the house. You're really buying the legal entity described in the documents, which is a particular location and the rights that go along with it. And so he's saying that when you buy something, you want to pick it in a market that's going to get you. Now, again, we're talking about investment property. We're not talking about where you want to live. We're talking about where you're buying for investment purposes. You want to buy a high quality investment that's going to appreciate more than average. And so you're looking for cities with good economies, with good employment prospects, with good transportation, with good future growth prospects. You don't want to buy in an area that's having financial difficulties, political difficulties, crime, things like that. So he's saying the most important thing when you buy an investment is buy something that's a good quality location, and don't compromise on that. And again, one of the main examples he gives is, and I've seen this over and over again, people with a 1031 exchange, now they're saving money on taxes. They sold the property and they make $100,000 and they don't want to pay $40,000 of taxes on it. And so they'll buy a property, but because they have to nominate 3 properties, they're in a rush. The first one's not available, and they're not nominating the third property that they wouldn't have chosen, but for this fact that they're saving some money in taxes, and they end up with an inferior property by more than the money they're saving on taxes. So he was saying it's really important that when you look at property, you really want to buy a great location. You want to buy in a great city. You want to buy in the right neighborhood within that city. You want to buy in the right little subsection of that. You don't want to buy, if across the street from a school is bad, you don't want to buy there. If it's good, that's where you want to buy. Does that help a little bit?
Hey, Bill.
Yes.
Yeah, this is Jack. So I don't do real estate investing myself, but I deal with a lot of them because I'm a lawyer. And one of the guys I was talking with a couple of years ago, who's near and dear to my heart, because he says he likes to buy properties near Apple stores.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes perfect sense, because if you think about, where are Apple stores? You know, they're generally in areas that have certain things, like it checks off all the things. You know, some people say, I want to buy properties that are near Ralph's stores, or I want to buy a property that's near Cheesecake Factory, because all those companies have boxes that they check as to where they're going to put their locations.
Right.
And if their checklist matches up to your checklist, then you only have to look for one thing, which is, is there an Apple store within 5 miles, 10 miles, whatever? So that's the other thing. And I mean, I'm surprised no one has said it. I mean, I learned as a kid, you know, the most important thing, 3 most important things in real estate: location, 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 right? Because everything else you can change. You can tear whatever is sitting on it down and build something else. You can't move the piece of property. So that you know, makes a lot of sense.
I think sometimes that philosophy, you know, I've heard about being near Starbucks or being near Whole Foods. I think the key thing is being near where they're opening one, right? Because they're opening, it means it's an area that's transitioning in a positive direction. And when you see that positive direction, you know there's going to be improvement. And so the property you're buying is at today's price, but you can see that Starbucks realizes it's going to be better in 5 years. That's why they're signing a 5 or 10 year lease. And so you're going where they're also betting their money, and they've done the heavy research for you. Gary,
yeah, I agree. Especially when you're talking about Starbucks. If you're talking about, oh, you want to buy something near Starbucks, it's like saying I want to buy a house near air. You know, you have to. You're right. It has to be one where there's one opening up or recently opened up. That makes a lot of sense.
Right, because they're saying it was at X, it's going to be at X plus 25%, and so you're going to ride that wave forward. The housing around there is still at the older price. So, Gary, I know you had your hand up for a little bit. Are you still, you have a question?
Yep. Yeah, the 1% rule. I think that there are markets where you can still do that. I mean, I know Detroit is an area where you can do 1.5%, 2%. Not everybody has a stomach for Detroit, but Detroit actually, if you go back to rule number 1, which is never compromise on location, you know, I think you know, Detroit is one of those areas where you really have to know what you're doing. You know, like Memphis, you know, there are pockets. It's a very pockety neighborhood community, but if you know what you're doing, Detroit is in a great resurgence right now. And so I think you can hit the 1% rule in single family if you're willing to go, you know, far to the Midwest in certain places, the Rust Belt, and also, but you have to be careful. And when you're doing that, you really have to pay attention to rule number 1, which is buy in the right neighborhood, because you don't want to get stuck someplace where people are afraid to go out at night and things like that.
Yeah, no, I would agree that I met people who are investors in Detroit. They know by block where to invest and where not to. And they have hard and fast rules based on those locations. And they also know by block what the rent should be and where they can buy a property and upgrade the, you know, rehab the property and get higher rents. They know where they can't do that. And so that gets down to really knowing your market and pricing your property properly. But there's a lot of variance in those markets. You're right, in Detroit, Memphis, that in all those areas you can make money if you're in the right spot at the right price. But you have to really know the location. There are people who love, you know, certain parts of Detroit. They love, you know, certain pockets within there, and they know them and they make good money at that. And unless you want to go there and learn that, you're gonna find things tough. Dominic, did you have a question?
I'm very excited to hear you guys talking about Detroit. I'm actually from there, so I recently just came, well, not recently, but I moved to California, and he's very right. It's definitely in a resurgence, but you have to be very, very careful, and it helps to have people on the ground, because just you going there and visiting, you're definitely not going to get the full effect and the full idea of what's going on in that area. You gotta be very careful.
Yeah, you have to really know what you're doing in there. Detroit's, even though it's declined in population, still a big area. There's a lot of variance from one side to the other, and the part that's hot is red hot. The part that's not is not, and they have different costs. You know, when you have snow, you have different costs than we do in Los Angeles. So you have to be careful about where you get involved in those things and know that market. But definitely is possible.
Bill.
Okay, Andrews, yes.
Yeah, I just want to kind of tag on what Jack said and share what I heard. I'm in another networking group with Dan Barrero. He's a real estate guy in New York. He's been doing real estate since the mid-1980s, and he often goes into cities and see where developers has put in for crane permits, where in our case, California Department of Transportation are planning exits and things like that, and he often among many things, they also buy land. And that is a little bit what Jack said. So these companies, the cities, the hospitals, the big box stores, they have already done the research and the preparation for us. And if they think it's an opportunity around there, in around that area where they think there is an opportunity for us.
Yeah, and you know, sometimes you talk about risking money, you have to have something to rely on for your certainty. And if you're from that city, you know the area. Like I said, I used to live in Boca Raton. I looked at this one investment and said, that makes a lot of sense because I know that area is a high rent area, not a low rent area. And the building had just not been updated over 25, 30 years, but by rehabbing it, you know, and I know that neighborhood. And so I'm sure Dominic knows certain neighborhoods in Detroit where he'd say, I wouldn't buy there. And other parts he'd say, yeah, that's one of the really hot areas. And there's certain investors, I think Intuit, and there's a couple of the big investors in Detroit. They're just buying up blocks and blocks and redeveloping. Now, sometimes those things turn around backwards. In Las Vegas, I know Zappos, the founder there, was buying up blocks and blocks to build kind of a community for his company. And unfortunately, he got involved with drugs and the whole thing kind of fell apart. So, you know, anytime a city is too dependent on one company, you have to be a little careful. Even one industry, ideally, you want to find an area that has several factors working for it rather than just one. But depends on your exit strategy. And again, cash flow, as long as it cash flows and you have some protection, you're in good shape. But you know, when a whole industry moves out of a neighborhood, it's hard. You know, that cash flow can turn really fast. Generally, higher income, you know, middle income employees and higher are going to pay their rent. They're going to leave town and pay their rent on time. So generally, that's why people like those areas from an investment point of view. Yeah, Rosalind, the tragic story of growing too fast. Well, people have big dreams, and for every, you know, Amazon and Google, there's 100 people who fell short by a little bit, and that little bit can be a crash and burn. So, Rosalind and I had a chance to chat the other day, and if you want to see our discussion, we're on YouTube. You know, something I've been able to do is talk to different industry leaders, and Rosalind is both a professor and she also is a businesswoman who helps real estate people generate some additional forms of income. So if you're interested, I'll put the link to that in the chat box as well. Okay, what else we have? Who else has a question or a problem or some sort of a challenge that we can work on today as a group? Anybody?
Bill, this is Gary. I just wanted to point something out on the list again. Know your exit strategy. You know, something you said kind of sparked that in terms of, you know, things that can go wrong. And while this is partly done under your, wherever the list was for, you know, underwrite the worst case scenario, I think another way to say that is always try to have multiple exit strategies. So if your primary exit strategy doesn't work out, you know, if that flip doesn't work out and you're flipping in Los Angeles, you probably can't turn around and just buy and hold it unless maybe there's an ADU and maybe you can break even for a while because now you've got two rents instead of just one. So I always try to look for multiple exit strategies. So if the primary one doesn't work, I've got a backup.
Well, yeah, that's another way. Having a couple A, B, and C options is always better than having just one strategy. So I'm not getting trapped into a situation. And sometimes you overlook something, and what you think is an exit strategy is the off ramp is closed. Who besides me has been driving down the freeway, and all of a sudden the off ramp you plan to go to is closed? You're going to. For me, sometimes I'll go to swim practice down the 405. I'm on the 10 to go south of the 405. And the transition to the 405 is closed. That's never good, right? So that's an example of life. What do? Well, you go after Overland, but man, it's just tough to get back on track. And business deals are the same way, that sometimes you have an exit strategy in mind, but it doesn't quite get you there. So.
Hi,
okay.
This is Nanette.
Hey, Nanette, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. What's going on?
Good. I'm about to sell a couple of properties, and I'm doing it because I feel like this market with the inflation and stuff, I might as well get out now and wait for the crash. And I'm wondering what opportunities people see, because what I figured out was I would move into like fourplexes, but I'm looking for like a low price with good cash flow. So I wanted to know what ideas people have of markets I can look into.
Where are the properties that you have now?
In Palmdale.
And so you're looking to get outside of California, outside of Palmdale?
I think I'm gonna have to, just because of the price point. I figured I want like a really low price point, maybe like under 200,000 for a fourplex. So I know I can't get that out here. So I wanted to look in another state that would have something like that with good, strong cash flow. I'm not as interested in the appreciation like I was here.
Mm-hmm. Have you looked at Bakersfield?
Not really. I'll start looking there.
Just because it's in California and it's not too far from where you're at, and I always feel like, I don't want to make you drive over the hill, but I think sometimes that, when we can, as agents, if you can find a way to leverage your business into your investments, I think that's the holy grail, right? I'm going to Florida to look at as an investor, but I'm also going as an agent, so the whole thing's tax deductible for me. And at the same time, if I meet somebody who needs to sell a house and I broker it, that pays for the whole thing. And so I'd say to you, take a look, since you're licensed in Bakersfield or licensed in California. It seems to me it's a similar market that you might find some additional I actually literally yesterday was online looking at some units in Bakersfield that, again, I'm not quite ready to make an investment. I have some things tied up for a few months, but if I was, I think that's something that I would definitely look at. So something to think about.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure, Annette. Thanks for jumping on today. Okay, what else do we have here? Did I cover all the questions so far? Anybody else have any questions that we didn't cover yet about investing? Yeah.
Hey, this is Angelica. Yeah. What is your take on investing with loans such as like a 3.5 down? So there's programs that help you buy for like first time home buyers. So you just elaborate more on that, and getting a purchase of a home like on a 3.5% down. Yeah.
Well, the 3.5% down programs are almost exclusively for owner occupants only. That said, many people buy a house with the idea of living in it and then change their mind after they move in, after 3 months, 6 months, or a year. So there's no law against changing your mind. You just can't go into it and fraud the lender. If your intention from the day one is to invest, then you probably can't qualify for that loan. The other thing I'd say is, depending on where you're buying, sometimes certain bond programs or new home builders will put certain restrictions. If you sell a property a certain time period, that will limit. So you have to make sure you check into that if you're using a bond program, and check into that if you're buying a new home, construction in particular. That said, there are many people who buy their first house, use 3.5% down. A popular concept, Gary talked about it, Gary Payroll, about adding on a unit, adding an additional dwelling unit, and maybe living in the back and renting the front. There are people who do that and use AirBNB for the front or the back. And then another option would be just to what's called house hacking. There are people who buy a house who are single. I don't know your situation. I'm not here to get people in your home. You'd be careful, I think, in particular as a woman. But there are people who, they buy a 3-bedroom house and they live in one and rent out the other 2 bedrooms, and or the living room, or they crash the living room and rent out the other bedrooms and make some money that way. So that's called house hacking. So depending on what you want to do, those are options. House hacking is an option. Buying a property and adding an ADU is an option. And certainly buying a property with the idea that at some point in time you're going to either move out of it and rent it. The problem is when you buy a property with 3.5% down, because you have so much loan on it, it often is hard to rent it for enough to cover the costs and the expenses, including taxes, insurance, and then reasonable repairs and inevitable vacancy. So if you find such a property you can do that, that's great. And there are people who buy one and rent it out and then move on to another one, move on to another one. And I know my brother did that. That's how he retired. He bought a house and another, then another, then another, moving up each time, and then he sold the last one and retired. So that's one way to do it. But it depends. Just when you do your financing, just be careful. And the other part is, again, getting in at 3.5% down because you're borrowing 96.5%, the payment's gonna be a little higher. And if you can't use rent to cover it, now you've just increased your lifestyle. My experience when people buy houses, they're gonna pay about twice as much as when they were renting. And while it's true in the long run, buying has great advantages. If you're just raising your lifestyle past what you can really afford, you're really just wasting money. So you have to be careful about how you get into that.
Yeah, because it was an actual real estate investor, and he was just trying to give me tips on investing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, one second.
Yeah, and lots of times you'll find people giving advice who haven't used that advice themselves. So I'd be really careful. That's one thing I like about Grant. He's buying a bunch of multifamily. He's showing you the deals he's doing, and that's what I want to buy. So I want to do what the coach is doing. We have to be careful as there are investors who will, there's real estate agents who will teach you what to do, but they're not doing it themselves because it's not really profitable in the long run. Okay, good. Other questions, comments, challenges? If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube or LinkedIn as well, if you put your comments in, they'll pop up here and I'll be able to answer your questions. Any other questions, challenges, problems, comments?
I was going to chime in. Hi, Bill.
Yeah. Hey, Melissa, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Better now. And always great to hear your voice and see your smiling
Love
face.
being on these calls. I was actually surprised that you threw out the Bakersfield one. I mean, it's a great market to look into, affordable.
Mhm.
Just make sure, like you said about location, you guys check out before, because I do have friends and family that have invested out there and do reside out there. And there are some sketchy pockets. So
Oh,
yeah, so just, I would say if you know anything about Oildale, stay away from it. It might be changing. And then I was going to say Lancaster is another one. I think somebody else commented about Palmdale, but those are affordable housing and they're just going to keep expanding. So those are great ways to try to invest in California too.
Right. Yeah. Palmdale and
Thank you
Lancaster.
for that.
Both, I think, are. Who said thank you?
I think Nanette.
Yeah, I think Lancaster, Palmdale, both. I have, within California, great opportunities. If you don't like those, then I think Bakersfield's kind of the next market and in some ways similar in the outskirts of Bakersfield. But you're right, there are parts of Bakersfield that are really rough. So
Yeah.
and
The homeless has gotten really bad. I don't know what they're doing about that, but I know there's money in the city, and it's just nice houses for the most part. So
yeah, and traditionally Bakersfield was a very oil-rich area, but as the state turns against oil services and agriculture, and I think in some ways California's really turned against agriculture as well. So those are two big industries that traditionally have pulled that area along, that are both really struggling. And it's just now become, I think, a collection point, as you said, for homeless and for migration, illegal or whatever you want to call it, migrants who are there, and that's they can live on the government services, but they're not going to make good neighbors if you're trying to rent property out, for sure.
well, it's interesting because the Kern River dumps into there from Lake Isabella. And so like, I've seen it happen. Like they go out and like swim in the river and go into the shade. It's just, it's a different world. It's very strange, but unfortunately a lot of people can't afford to live and drugs get into their life, and that's that.
Rosedale, I hear Rosedale and Southwest are good areas in Bakersfield to purchase.
Oh yeah. Rosedale's great. Totally. Yeah.
Yeah, the amount of drugs in America today is really staggering. Somehow it's just off the radar as a problem, but in places like Bakersfield and Inland Empire, I mean, those parts are just, there are neighborhoods of just zombies. It's just...
they're everywhere. I live in Torrance, and, I don't remember growing up out here seeing maybe one or two here and there, and they're just everywhere with cities. I mean, a lot of it does have to do with the fact that the housing is becoming untouchable and people fall to circumstance. But, it's like you can pretty much see a homeless person or like, questionable things going on almost anywhere.
I was in Santa Monica today, which is one of the richest places in the United States. It is amazing what goes on there. I don't understand how people can pay that kind of money and live like that. But we live in crazy times. I don't know. I see things every day I never would imagine. And I understand it's happening everywhere. I'm excited. I was in New York. It was funny. My daughter went to college in New York, in Manhattan. And I was staying on South Central Park. And she asked me, what it was like. And, here in LA, we have so much homeless, particularly Mar Vista, West LA, Westwood, Echo Park. So she asked me what it was like. I said, well, to be honest, there were some homeless people, like always in New York, but I don't remember there being, as I remember, it's about the same as had been the past, or maybe even less. There's less people in New York. And so I think it was probably even a fewer less homeless people as everything's less. So I think there's about half as many people overall in Manhattan. So it's probably half as many homeless.
Yeah.
But it's not more by percentage. But you go to LA in certain parts, it's just overwhelming how many homeless people are. I'm going to Florida this week. I'm anxious to see. Again, I'm sure in nicer cities they seem to police that, but I'm just anxious to see what life is like there. I used to live in Boca Raton, so I keep telling my wife I'm going to go there. I'm going to drag her with me and drag my daughter with her, but I haven't made any progress on that one.
So when I was 18 years old, I was showing property at 7th and Spring in downtown, and Skid Row was like literally like 1 or 2 streets down. Now it's like years later. I'm not going to expose how many years later, but it's all like Starbucks, like we talked about. It is, boutique fashion, and Skid Row has moved to a different corner. And again, that goes back to the future. You have to just be careful with where you're doing what we talked about. And that's just, I've seen it happen. I mean, I never thought I'd see it in a lifetime, but I have seen it happen, and it's amazing.
Yeah. It's, I don't know how to explain it. And I don't know where it's going. I kind of gave up trying to predict things. It's just really, I've just seen things I've never, I don't know if you know me, but I'm kind of a historian. I like reading about American history, and I read things that happened World War I, World War II before, and I see things happen in our country that are historic. You read about the bonus army marches, and you read about, there were riots in Washington, D.C. on veterans of World War I not getting paid and things like that, and camps and such. But I don't think they quite had the same number of people we have today. So, Rosalind, Professor Khan, I see your hands up.
I had a couple questions. You've talked a lot about, researching, and I was wondering if is there a website or is there a page or something like that you can recommend? I remember my family had bought something in what was supposed to be some exclusive property in Tiburon, and it turned out to be a dump yard. And, we talk about location. That's part one of the question. And then part two, I was recently at a political event this weekend, and the city councilman of the 4th area was talking about when you look at the homeless people in the city of Los Angeles, the numbers have actually gone down. But what has happened has been there's legislation that they need to be in covered buildings, covered structures, which is why we're going and seeing the outgrowth of all these tent cities that are just all over the place. So, is question number one, is there a resource that you could say, everyone's guide to how to beat out good real estate from bad, or is it just a chance by luck, or you go to a particular specialist and they can tell you this is good or bad property?
Real estate is a hyper-local business, and so depending on where you want to buy, you got to find the expert in that area. I think there's a great resource I use a lot, Bigger Pockets, the Bigger Pockets podcast. And they have a website, great place for all things real estate investment, and nationally where to find people. But I think once you find an area, you need to find a local expert who can guide you through that area in particular and help you find properties. And even Grant Cardone, who's a sharp guy and literally has millions of people follow him. He's on TV, literally has millions of people know who he is. He even says that most of his deals come through brokers because they're the boots on the ground who know the deals and bring the deals to him. And so I think the best advice is once you determine an area that you like, that you feel committed to, that you think is going to grow, go and find in that area real estate brokers who know that area and are willing to bring you deals that you can choose from. I think that's the best avenue. So that was the first question. What was the other question? I'm sorry.
Second question was just a comment about the homeless growth and the expansion of that. It wasn't. It's just a fact finding, and it's just horrific. I remember I was in Las Vegas with a fashion show I was at, and this lady was showing me this thing that was in Panorama City of a guy who used to have a business, and he has this beautiful multi-story little thing on the side of the freeway that's a miniature. And it had made the rage on Facebook. It's just,
I don't know how you can make the case that there's not more homeless today. I mean, personally, I haven't researched that subject, but I find that awfully hard to believe. I think what I have seen is, whether good or bad, an acceptance of people doing things were never acceptable. It was never acceptable to pitch a tent on the sidewalk and call that yours in my lifetime until a couple of years ago. I think whether it be the police are scared and get caught, they have limited manpower, or what the political reasons are. But I find that hard to believe. It just doesn't. And now I'm opening else's input, but I just can't imagine anybody making the case that there's less homeless now than there was a year or 2 or 5 years ago. It just doesn't seem to match up with what I see.
It was just counterintuitive, and she said you got to give credit to these small individual places that they've been able to put some people up, even if it's temporary, even if it's just a small period of time. But
okay, but I still don't think that excuses. We in LA County have spent billions of dollars on housing for people who don't want to be housed. One of the challenges is that, when I was young, there are people who were mentally ill who were forced into mental facilities against their will, involuntary commitment. And we made a decision as a society, 60s and 70s, there was a famous movie, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, that really showed the dark underside of, putting people away. And occasionally there'd be somebody who was sane who got committed against their will. It was a common thing up until the 20s or 30s that women, when a husband wanted a divorce, he would get his wife committed against her will. It was horrific for certain women what happened and how they were treated, no doubt. But the flip side is you have these people who are mentally ill in society. They're not getting treatment. They don't want to take their medicine. They don't want to be treated. They're not going to be treated, and they intermingle with society. And they're we want to wear masks. They're not wearing masks. I mean, and that's just a metaphor for having them in our life. And I think some cities tolerate it and some don't. It strikes me when I drive around Southern California, you don't see homeless with tents pitched in the city proper of, say, El Segundo or in Culver City. You see them all over Los Angeles. You don't see them in the city of Beverly Hills. Why is it the surrounding cities don't have it, but the city of LA does? The obvious answer to me is the city of LA, for whatever reasons, has decided to tolerate it. And that they might be morally superior. I'm not here to make a political judgment, but I think it's disingenuous for them to act like there's not more. They've obviously allowed them to be there. And anytime anybody stands up to get rid of the homeless, it becomes big news like it is in Venice. So again, I'm not here making a moral judgment.
There's one other interesting thing. I heard a friend of mine who was in Georgia, and what they're doing, and I think it is in Florida, he said he knew a person who was previously homeless, and what they're doing is they're sending him with a one-way ticket to Hawaii. And so Hawaii doesn't have the money to go ahead and send them off to somewhere else. And so you're going to see one of America's pristine places overrun with homeless.
Yeah.
Rosalind, I'd like to, this is Gary Payrow. I'd like to just jump in on your previous point, which was, is there a way to do due diligence, I guess? And I certainly agree with Bill. You need to have boots on the ground. But I wanted to share with you something, and maybe with the rest of the call, that note investors, which is one of my primary investment models, we have a different kind of problem that we're trying to solve. Normally, if you're buying property, especially if you're rehabbing it and to either hold or to flip, you really need to focus. You need, you can't have teams, construction teams all over the country. But when you're buying notes, you're not rehabbing the property. You're not responsible for the property. You're moving into the position of a bank, and a bank loans all over the place. And normally, most note investors, they will have maybe a favorite state. But like a lot of notes are invested in Texas. Texas is a pretty big place. Most note investors don't say, I'll only invest in these places. They mostly have, I'll only not invest in those places. And so the palette is pretty wide for people who buy debt. And I would say that we do have ways to look at properties. One of my favorite tools is Google Maps. with Google Maps. You can look at the property, you can look at the neighborhood, you know, but like, you know, I'm looking at a property right now in New Jersey, and I'm one of the reasons I'm interested in that property is because I have a buddy who's an agent whose son lives close enough to go look at the property. So, you know, there's also City Data has something. Neighborhood Scout used to be really good, but they now charge for their services. Trulia has a pretty good crime mapping algorithm, and so that's a great thing to do, is to find out what the crime is in the area. If you're in Memphis, the local newspaper has a really good crime reporting service, but there's sort of like a first level look and then a deeper level. So it depends on what you're looking for. If you want to reach out to me, you know, feel free, and I can talk to you more about it. But just, you know, note investors kind of have to have that process of due diligence kind of mapped out in two phases. One is, am I even interested in this? And then once I'm interested, how do I go deeper? And that usually, to go deeper, you need boots on the ground.
Gary, I had a question for you before we get off this call.
Sure.
For the note side of the business. I know we're talking about projected, you know, we're projecting that we'll have a lot of inflation down the line, and they're saying people who have debt are going to win, and most likely the lenders are going to lose because those dollars don't buy as much. So what do you see for the note business with that in mind?
Well, that's a good point. I am transitioning from the performing notes side to the non-performing notes side. It's so, just to make sure everyone understands, when you if you have a note at, you know, 8% and inflation is at 10%, all of a sudden that's not looking as such a good investment. There are you know, ways to mitigate that. One is to keep keep shorter term notes, or buy only partials, where you're not buying a 30-year note, you're just buying the first 5 years of a note, so you can get your money in and out faster. Non-performing notes, you can get significantly more yield. And the interesting thing about that is there's, you know, it's hard not to imagine there being a huge supply of non-performing notes coming up in the next 6 to 18 months, just because of all the mortgages that are in you know, forbearance. So a lot of these people are not going to be able to you know, work their way out of those debts, and so you can buy a non-performing note at a much deeper discount than you can a performing note. And you can either get the note reperforming, meaning you buy the note at a discount, you can get the borrowers to start paying again, and usually at a you know, when you buy it at a discount, your yield is higher. But the other thing is, if they don't end up paying, you can get either the house back, or you can get all of your money up front in a big lump sum. And so you might go in for $50,000, you know, a $90,000 balance for $50,000. And if that house goes to foreclosure, you get the full $90,000 in, you know, 6 to 9 months. You know,
I think what was really key about what you said, thank you so much, Gary, was beating inflation. And so watching what yield you get for those notes. I think that was so key. Thanks for that.
You're welcome. And again, feel free to reach out to me. I'll go ahead and put my information out there so that anyone who wants to chat about that or know more about how that might work. Also, any investors out there who are doing wholesaling or buy and hold, if you have properties now and you would like to find a way to make more cash flow with less work, I work with landlords all the time to convert a portion of their rentals to purchases. And if you're going to sell a property in the next 5 years, you should do it this year under the current capital tax gain rate, because you know, it's going to go up significantly. And what we can do is we can structure a sale where you can get a series of payments. You can get cash flow over the next 5-10 years, but you lock it in at a tax rate which is with today's capital gain rates. So I just want to throw that out there. So any landlords or any wholesalers that would like to find a new way to monetize your business, I'd be happy to talk to you.
Just
Very
one
good.
more thing too. I know we're on the witching hour. If you guys download the app that's Citizen, it does have real-time like crime reports. It doesn't have every single city, but I see Atlanta, I see Boston, and it will tell you like if there's been a crime reported, if somebody was shot, if there was a fire. So you kind of have an idea about where in the vicinity it is. It is the Citizen app, and it is free.
Citizen app?
Yes.
Thank you.
My wife and daughter watch that and they freak out and send each other texts all night long.
Well, if you're in LA, you're like, it's going to be firing it off all at all times. So shut off the notifications.
Nonstop. My wife and I went on vacation. We're in New York and Long Island. Went to bed at night and it's so quiet. I didn't hear any fireworks, gunshots, sirens, or helicopters. I didn't know what to do. So I made a recording. That way when I'm going to Florida, I can listen to the noise that I'm used to hearing.
The airplanes, you know.
You
the
look on that
dogs
app,
barking.
it's scary how many burglaries there are around us. And truth is, they're mostly on major streets. Like I live between, let's say, Robertson and Pico, on Robertson, just nonstop car thefts
Yeah.
and break-ins at stores. Okay, hey, you know what? We're actually past 4 o'clock. I got to run. Thank you for all you guys who participated. Dominic, it was nice meeting you. Thanks for coming on. And Rosalind, it was nice to see you again. And I put a link to my interview with you. Marcy, thanks for help. Anders, Professor Cashflow, Gary, thank you. Melissa, always a pleasure. And Annette, nice meeting you. Great
Thank
having
you
you on
so
the
much,
call.
everybody.
Thank you, Justin. Thanks for jumping in. I know a bunch of you also, other guys, participated. Thank you for making this work for us. Now, we do this every Tuesday, 3 p.m. Pacific. It's realestateinvestingzoom.com. And Thursdays, we do a probate-focused call, probateweekly.com. That's Thursdays, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. All the calls after we're done, if you're registered, you'll get a link to the YouTube, and you can see the past episodes there. So thank you so much. I'm Bill Gross, LAProbateExpert.com. Call me or email me if I can help in any way. Make this week your best week ever. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks, Bill.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.